The laughter was the worst part, sharp, ugly echoing off the empty marble lobby. Maria Collins could feel every camera in the downtown office building catching the way 3 young men yanked at her uniform shirt, pulling the fabric until the buttons popped and scattered across the polished floor. Her cleaning cart rattled away when they shoved it aside. The broom she had been using stood useless against the wall. Their voices dripped with mockery, their hands full of disrespect, and Maria's face burned not with shame alone, but with the first flickers of a rage she didn't dare show. Maria was 34, and cleaning was never supposed to be her life's work. She had once dreamed of being an art teacher, but when her mother's illness swallowed her savings, she took whatever work would keep the rent paid. Night shifts at the corporate tower weren't glamorous, but they were steady. She knew the building's every corridor, its late-night silence, and the comfort of order she could impose on a space. That night, however, there was no order. Only chaos wearing the faces of 3 entitled men who thought her presence was theirs to defile. They were regulars of the late-night lounge on the 23rd floor, trust fund troublemakers who'd stumble out in suits loosened at the collar, loud from overpriced whiskey. She'd seen them before, always rowdy, always skating on the edge of what security would allow. But tonight, with the overnight guard on another floor, they treated the lobby as their playground and Maria as their punchline. It began with words. They called her Mop Girl, blocking her path as she pushed her cart toward the elevator. Then came the mock bows, the exaggerated offers to tip her for a good time, and the way they circled her like she was prey. Maria had ignored worse, keeping her eyes on the floor. But one of them, the tallest with gelled blonde hair and a smirk carved into his face, reached out, catching her sleeve. The others laughed, egging him on, until his grab turned into a yank. The sound of fabric tearing was louder than the music spilling from the lounge upstairs. Maria gasped, clutching at the gap in her shirt, but they just kept laughing. "What's the matter, cleaner?" Little shy one jeered. Another plucked a button off the floor and flicked it at her. Inside, Maria's stomach twisted. Years of swallowing her pride to keep a job told her to back down, to avoid making a scene. But under that, an older voice rose her father's. She remembered him teaching her to hold a broom like a staff, spinning it with ease in their backyard. Anything can be a weapon if you know how to use it, he had told her, sweat glistening on his brow. Back then, it was a game. Now, it felt like prophecy. They finally let her go, strutting out into the night, with laughter still bouncing off the marble walls. Maria gathered her cart, her fingers trembling, her shirt hanging loose over her shoulder. She kept her face calm as the security guard returned, pretending she hadn't noticed anything. But inside, a quiet promise formed, the kind that takes root in humiliation and grows in the dark. She wasn't going to let this stand. She knew their patterns, the floors they haunted, the hours when cameras were blind and guards were elsewhere. They thought she was nothing but a cleaner, someone invisible. They would learn soon enough just how wrong they were. Mary pushed her cart into the elevator and rode up to the storage floor, her mind no longer on mops or trash bags. She found her broom leaning against the wall, its handle worn smooth from years of use. She ran her hand along it, gripping it tighter. This wasn't just a tool for sweeping, not anymore. Maria didn't sleep that morning. She sat at her small kitchen table, the weak dawn light spilling across stacks of unopened bills, a chipped mug of black coffee cooling in her hands. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, the smirks, the way their laughter felt like a stain that wouldn't wash out. She had walked away from them that night, but her body had carried the humiliation home like a second skin. Her phone buzzed with the message from her sister in Ohio. Something about their mother's next appointment. But Maria barely registered it. Her mind was on her father again, on the afternoons He'd insisted she learn self-defense for the world we actually live in, not the one you wish we did. He'd been a quiet man, but not naive. He'd worked construction until an accident left him walking with a limp, and in the evenings, he'd sit her down in the backyard with a broomstick, showing her how to pivot, block, and strike. At the time, she'd rolled her eyes, more interested in sketching than spinning a stick. But now, with the memory of those men's hands on her shirt, she could almost hear his voice. Don't wait for someone to save you, Mari. Make yourself the wall they can't get past. She got up and moved to the corner of her living room, where the furniture could be pushed aside. She found a spare broom handle in her utility closet and gripped it like she had 20 years ago. Her first movements were clumsy, the weight shifting wrong, her wrists stiff. But with each swing, she remembered how to shift her hips for power, how to keep the end of the handle between her and her target, how to turn defense into attack in one smooth motion. Hours passed. Sweat dripped down her back. She practiced in silence, her breathing steady, her grip tightening with each repetition. She didn't just want to know the moves. She wanted them to live in her muscles, ready to strike without thought. By noon, her arms ached, but she didn't stop. She switched from striking the air to hitting the edge of a couch cushion she'd propped against the wall. The dull thud of the broom against the padding filled the room, each impact carrying the weight of the laughter she was erasing from her mind. She thought about their habits, how they lingered after the lounge closed, wandering the building as if they owned it. She remembered the layout of the service hallways, the blind spots in the camera coverage, the times the security guard's routine left the lobby unmonitored for minutes at a time. Maria's job gave her knowledge. They didn't have knowledge she could use. When the sun dipped low, she finally showered, letting the hot water wash away the stiffness in her muscles. But it couldn't wash away the plan forming in her head. She wouldn't go looking for trouble, but she wouldn't run from it either. That night, she returned to work. Her uniform pressed her posture straighter. She pushed her cleaning cart through the lobby like any other shift. But the broom, leaning in the corner, wasn't just for sweeping. She'd taped the handle for better grip. It was ready. She moved through her tasks quietly, keeping one ear tuned to the elevator dings, the hum of the lounge above. At 1:12 a.m., she heard it, the echo of footsteps, too loud for the empty lobby voices she recognized instantly. She felt her pulse quicken, but her hands didn't shake. This time, she wasn't just the cleaner. She was the wall. Maria had always known that patience was a cleaner's greatest tool. You didn't rush the wax into the marble, and you didn't let your anger dictate your timing. She kept to her usual pace, head down, letting the faint reflection of the glass doors show her the three silhouettes entering the lobby. Same swagger, same loosened ties, same smug laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. They didn't notice the subtle shift in her eyes, the way she tracked their positions in the polished floor's reflection. She stayed near the far wall, pushing her cart toward the corner where the security cameras didn't quite reach. It was a gap she'd mapped in her mind years ago. One of many little blind spots the building's designer never imagined would be useful for anything beyond avoiding awkward glances with late-night guests. Her pulse drummed in her ears, but she made no sudden moves. The broom leaned against her cart, angled so she could grip it in one smooth motion. She heard one of them, the blonde ringleader, say, "Hey, it's Mop Girl," like she was a regular attraction they'd come to visit. The other two laughed, their footsteps closing in. Maria's hands stayed calm, folding the rag on the cart's edge, her eyes still downcast. She wanted them to believe she was the same woman they'd humiliated. The trap wouldn't work if they sensed what was coming. "Where's the smile, cleaner? Didn't you miss us?" the shortest one said, leaning against the marble column beside her. Maria straightened slightly, letting her lips twitch into the smallest, most calculated smirk. "Oh, I've been waiting," she said, her voice low enough that they had to lean in. The ringleader stepped closer, and the air around them seemed to tighten. "That's so. Maybe we should—" The sound of the elevator doors closing behind them cut him off. The lobby was theirs now, or so they thought. Maria's left hand gripped the broom handle, her right hand steadying the cart, as she subtly stepped back into the camera's blind spot. The first move wasn't hers, it never would be. It came when the ringleader reached for her arm again, the same cocky tilt to his head as before. Only this time, her arm wasn't there to grab. She pivoted left, pulling the broom from the cart in one fluid motion. The wooden handle sliced the air with a sharp whip as she spun it across her body, stopping just inches from his chest. The suddenness of the movement froze all three for a second long enough for Maria to set her stance. "You want to dance?" she said, her voice colder now. They laughed again, but it was thinner this time. "You're not going to hit us with a broom," the tall one scoffed. Maria let the handle drop slightly as if she might back down. Then she stepped forward, sliding her hands into position like her father had taught her. "You'd be surprised," she said. The space between them closed in fast. She shifted her weight to her back foot, feeling the solid ground beneath her. Every muscle in her arms remembered the hours of practice. Every nerve in her body was tuned for the moment she'd been building toward since that night. The ringleader's smirk wavered. "What's the matter, mop girl?" he said, but this time there was a thread of uncertainty in his voice. Maria's eyes didn't leave his. She let the silence stretch the tension coil tighter until she could almost feel the snap coming. This was the moment. The broom in her hands wasn't a tool anymore. It was a promise. The first strike landed before any of them had time to blink. Maria's broom handle cracked across the ringleader's forearm with a sharp thwack, the sound echoing off the marble walls. His hand recoiled instantly, a hiss of pain slipping through his teeth. She pivoted, letting the momentum carry the broom in a smooth arc that caught the second man square in the ribs. The dull thud sent him staggering sideways into the column. The tall one lunged, trying to grab the broom from her hands. But Maria's grip was solid. Years of pushing and pulling heavy equipment gave her forearms the strength most people underestimated. She stepped into him, twisting the handle in a sudden upward snap that slammed into his chin. His head jerked back, and he stumbled into the decorative planter behind him. They were no longer laughing. Maria moved with precision, not frenzy. Every step was measured. Every strike placed where it would sting, but not cripple. The broom's bristles brushed the floor as she spun it low, sweeping the ringleader's feet out from under him. He hit the marble with a grunt, scrambling to push himself up, only to find the broom's end pressed against his throat. "Still think I'm just the cleaner," she said, her voice calm, but heavy with authority. The shorter one tried to circle behind her, but she was ready. A swift turn, the handle whipping around, connected with his shoulder. He yelped, stumbling back. She kept moving, never giving them space to regroup. The tall one came at her again, fists clenched, but she sidestepped and used the broom's length to guide his momentum into the wall. His shoulder hit hard, and he bounced off, dazed. The ringleader's bravado had cracked completely. Hey, we're done, all right," he panted, holding his hands up, as if that would erase the smirk he'd worn earlier. Maria didn't lower the broom. She stepped closer, forcing them into the far corner of the lobby. The marble floor beneath their feet gleamed from her hours of work, and now it made their footing slick, keeping them off balance. "This isn't your playground," she said, her tone low but sharp. "You don't touch me. You don't touch anyone." They nodded quickly, eyes darting toward the exit. But Maria wasn't finished. She knew the cameras had caught enough of their retreat into the corner, but she wanted the message burned into their memory. She spun the broom one last time, bringing the handle to a sudden stop an inch from the ringleader's cheek. He flinched hard, and the other two instinctively stepped back. "Go," she ordered. They didn't need telling twice. All three moved fast, their expensive shoes clicking in uneven rhythm toward the glass doors. They pushed out into the cold night air, their laughter replaced by muttered curses and embarrassed silence. Maria stood in the empty lobby, her breathing steady, the broom still in her hands. She let the silence settle, the adrenaline slowly draining from her veins. She'd waited for this moment, not for revenge alone, but for the restoration of something they'd tried to take from her. The elevator dinged in the distance, and the security guard's voice echoed faintly as he called her name. Maria leaned the broom back against her cart, the handle warm from her grip. She gave it one last glance before resuming her work as if nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew, and so did they, that the cleaner wasn't someone to corner anymore. By the time Maria finished her shift, the building's security office was buzzing. She hadn't gone to them directly. She didn't need to. The cameras in the lobby had caught everything from the moment the men swaggered in to the point they were stumbling out, clutching their sides and avoiding her eyes. The footage didn't show every strike. The blind spot still did its job, but it captured enough to tell the story. And in that story, Maria wasn't the victim. The head of security, a grizzled man named Don, who'd been working the tower longer than most of its tenants had been alive, called her in before she could leave. "Maria," he said, leaning over the playback screen, "you want to tell me what exactly went down tonight?" She met his gaze without flinching. "They came at me again," she said. "This time, I defended myself." Don's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to her. His expression was unreadable for a long moment before he sighed. "Good," he muttered, "because they've been trouble for months, and I've been waiting for something I could hand to the police." By noon, the video was in the hands of the authorities. The ringleader, identified as the son of a wealthy real estate developer, tried to spin the incident as a misunderstanding. But the bruises told a different story, and so did the footage. The shorter one had a hairline fracture in his ribs. The tall one sported a split lip and a sprained shoulder. The police weren't swayed by their excuses. Word spread fast, not just in the building, but in the lounge upstairs, and the circles the men ran in. The woman they'd once mocked as Mop Girl was suddenly the cleaner no one dared make eye contact with for the wrong reasons. Even the most entitled tenants seemed to give her space, holding elevator doors for her instead of blocking them. Maria didn't gloat. That wasn't her way. She went to work each night, as she always had, methodically, quietly, broom in hand. But there was a new weight in her step, a quiet pride that wasn't about ego, but about reclaiming what they'd tried to strip from her. One evening, as she wheeled her cart past the security desk, Don called out to her. "Hey, Maria," he said, grinning just slightly. "You ever think about teaching self-defense?" She laughed, a short, surprised sound, but didn't answer right away. Maybe she would. Maybe that was the next chapter. But for now, she was content knowing she'd turned the thing they used to humiliate her into the very tool that set her free. The broom leaned against her cart as she moved down the quiet hallway, its handle smooth under her hand. It was still a cleaner's tool, but it was also something more, a reminder that strength didn't always look like what people expected. Sometimes it looked like a woman in a work shirt sweeping the floors. No one noticed until the moment they did. Outside, the winter wind rattled the glass doors, carrying away the last traces of their laughter. Inside, Maria worked in peace. In life, there will always be people who mistake kindness for weakness, who assume silence is submission. But dignity isn't something that can be stolen. It's something we either defend or allow others to trample. Maria's story is a reminder that self-respect often requires more than words. It demands action, courage, and the willingness to stand firm. The tools we have, whether they are skills, knowledge, or even a simple broom, can become powerful weapons when used with purpose. Never underestimate your own capacity to protect what matters. Strength often hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment it's needed most.